Hopefully we won't shortchange Daniel Cormier today, nor Jared Cannonier and some of the other night's big winners. But I need this segue to Israel Adesanya because our guest pick for Denver is coming up soon. And this is a guy who made his UFC debut in February. If anybody is going to challenge DC for Fighter of the Year in 2018, it's Israel Adesanya. He is 4-0 in the UFC. Big win over Derek Brunson. It came with 9 seconds to go in the opening round by TKO. Adesanya is all the rage right now, and rightfully so. He was all the rage coming in, Ken Flo. And I think when you look at the body of work, not just the kickboxing and boxing background, but now the mixed martial arts body of work. He could have come to the UFC several years ago. Joe Silva wanted this guy very badly, right? He bided his time. He waited till he was ready. Money wasn't an issue, so he wasn't in any rush to get to the big show. And now over the course of 9 or 10 months, we've seen him improve dramatically in a lot of areas just with the strength of 4 training camps. So I think Adesanya might be one fight away from a championship fight. He might be the backup when Whitaker and Gastelum fight for the UFC middleweight title sometime first quarter 2019. This kid is an absolute superstar. I think he'll be headlining a UFC pay-per-view by this time next year for sure.
One of the more impressive performances at UFC 230, in my opinion, and you have to credit his management and his coaching squad as well for what they've done with him, because for a couple reasons. Not only are they taking the right fights in the right order to get him the right experience to build up to this championship run, but he's getting better. He really is getting better. I think Derek Brunson was no doubt, in my mind, a tougher challenge than even Brad Tavares. And maybe he's not as well-rounded as a Brad Tavares, but he has fought some very tough competition and has some good wins over some elite guys. Yeah. And he was able to get to that clinch. He was able to get to his strong positions, and Israel Adesanya was able to stop every single takedown attempt. And granted, I think Derek Brunson was a little intimidated. He seemed a little gun-shy out there. He was shooting from a little far away, but he was still able to get to the clinch and still able to get some good scoring positions, and Adesanya just would not let him get to those positions and finish them. So huge credit to Adesanya, who looked way more comfortable when it came to those wrestling exchanges. He seemed very confident, and then once he was able to utilize his striking, it was all over for Derek Brunson.
So in terms of Adesanya's future, Kenny, certainly he has a style and a disposition that has really endeared him to fight fans around the world. I think there's a fight IQ element to him that maybe he doesn't get enough credit for. I even thought in his UFC debut, even though it was Rob Wilkinson, I don't care who it is, a guy with a UFC contract who tries to take you down 16 times, you stuff 13 of them, I'm giving you some modicum of credit for it. I don't know if the next fight for him is going to be the title, right? I thought, a Weidman fight would have had legs potentially if Chris had won, because Adesanya had called for that fight but said he wanted to get through Derek Brunson first. I think if you're Jacare Souza, you're not going near Israel Adesanya at 38, almost 39 years old. I think for Jacare, you're going to try like hell to wait and have your next fight be for a UFC championship. But for Israel Adesanya, there weren't a lot of people saying that if he could knock out Derek Brunson, he would be in the championship conversation, Kenny, and yet, don't you think he kind of is, given that performance and given that this was sort of billed as moving night in the middleweight division?
I think he's certainly in the conversation. Should he have that next title shot? I don't think so yet. And listen, I think he matches up extremely well against Robert Whitaker, but give him one more fight. I think that fight against Paulo Costa is interesting. I would love to see that fight. Costa, is going to get in his face and try to knock his head off. And I think that also brings out the best in Adesanya in a lot of ways. So I think that would be a fantastic fight. A little bit more experience, because I think the whole thing is really building up that level of experience in the octagon before you get that title shot. So when you do have it in front of you, you could take it right away and hold on to the belt after you get it. So I think he is building up that right experience. He is going against good wrestlers, but certainly don't put him up against Yoel Romero, for example, at 185 in his next one. I think that might be a little bit too much, but maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he does fight a guy like a Paulo Costa, get that experience, maybe fight a Robert Whitaker. By that time, he's ready to take on whoever it is.
How about the fact that he wants Weidman, though? One of the most, actually, had he taken Jacare down twice, he would have become the most accomplished takedown artist in UFC middleweight history, right? I mean, it's interesting that Weidman was the name on the tip of his tongue, right? Because if there's a wrestling challenge in that division, I mean, doesn't that conversation sort of start with Romero and Weidman?
Without a doubt. And I think Weidman is a very dangerous style matchup for him. And the fact that he called him out and the fact that, Chris has been struggling in his last 5 fights is an interesting choice. I don't know if that's the choice. Chris is a tough style matchup, and Chris kind of would have nothing to lose in that one. But, I don't know if that's the play, though.
All right. Yeah, I don't either. I just think it's interesting. Right, coming off a loss, I'm not sure that is the way they are going to go. Well, it's very interesting, and we're going to table the Cannonier stuff in a little bit. 59 years old, Ken Flo, I'll let you get back in here in a second. But I think on Souza, he knew if he was ever going to fight for the UFC championship in his life, he had to get this one, right? He's going to be 39 years old next month, and he feels like, Ray, he beat the greatest middleweight in UFC history on Saturday night, right? Like, he feels that's the gravity of this accomplishment for him, and I know that's an entirely different conversation, but I just felt like you got an urgent Jacare that, as Kenny said, we may have never seen before, and even that guy was getting beat pretty handily on the feet by your guy. So I think in terms of Chris's striking, I don't think it's ever looked better.
No, look, I was proud of the guy. We had a really great camp, and that's it, man. It is. I thought, like, to me, I saw that fight going away the first round. That in my head, if I had to script it, I thought he was going to pot shot him with that jab all night long, which he was kind of doing, and look for a couple of big shots here and there and sit down on some punches. And I also thought he would have went for, I think I thought he would have went for a couple of takedowns just so he could fake the takedowns to open up the hands. I mean, that was kind of what we talked about. But I think he felt so comfortable in there that he didn't even find that necessary. But I'd have to talk to him. I only spoke to him briefly just to make sure he was all right, and I didn't want to bother him. And, he's pretty fucking bummed out because I think, I think things were going good, and that just went bad. So...
Well, Ray, one of the reasons we love to have you on the podcast every week is because of your honesty, and I want to know what you think of that stoppage by Dan Miragliotta. Jacare Souza would seem to be kind of upset about it. He felt that it was probably a little bit late. What did you think about that?
A good thing. I'm going to surprise you on this one because I know I've always been critical of Dan, but I do think he wanted to give him every last effort. To win. The magnitude of that fight was pretty big. So I think I don't even know if this is true, but in my mind, I think he wanted to give him every last possible chance. And I like that for my fighters. I talked to Iaquinta about it last night. These guys want to die. They don't want anything stopped. And I think because, look, he sat down on his ass, which is always a good sign. He didn't face plant. And then he did go right for the leg. So until the point I saw him get hit once and he wasn't responsive, so I don't think he took any unnecessary damage, and I think he gave look, in Gastelum, he got sat down kind of the same way, and he survived, and he went on to win the fight. So I think, to Dan's credit, if he's thinking like that, I think, let's give him every last chance. I just saw him in his previous fight come back and win off the same thing. So I know he got criticized for that, but for me, as a coach, I know Chris was in great shape. I want to give him every last chance, and I think he did the right thing, and he didn't get hurt after that too much because Jacare's a gentleman. So I think at the end of the day, it all worked out. He might want to go back and look for previous future fights to see if maybe he wants to stop it short. But I don't think he wanted to stop that fight too short because that would have been a disaster.
Of course,
the guy was winning the fight, and
right.
Yeah, so
I like the fact that he has a good knowledge of the fighters, Dan Miragliotta does, and he understands that Chris has had a penchant for rallying through adversity. And you're right that Chris didn't get severely injured thereafter. But what if he had, right? And that's my issue, right? When I see that type of knockdown, this is what happens in boxing, right? A guy gets what, in my opinion, was a concussion, and then as long as he can stand the fuck up in 10 seconds, he can come up and get another concussion and then go get your CTE, right? So largely, I think maybe I came down too hard on Dan on the broadcast. I like that he was aware of the athlete, and you're right, Chris did seem to recover in a minute, but I just think it's fortunate that there wasn't more damage sustained after the fact.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. Look, it's okay, like, for you guys to come down, because by doing that, you do kind of keep that bubble, in the public eye, and we want to make sure the fighter's safety. But, when you talk to these guys, because, look, even, I got criticized for the Rockhold fight. Did that go too long? Dude, these guys, they're a different breed, man. They want to fight to the death, and yeah, we are there to protect them. But when you know a guy and you know what he could do, and you've seen him in training, and sometimes, guys that come back and they win fights. And look, even if a guy comes back and wins fights, right, that doesn't mean it's good for him either.
Of course.
But this is the sport we're in, man. We're in a we're in a fucking crazy sport, man.
Yeah.
And if
it's the greatest sport in the world,
even worried about it, I wouldn't get into this sport. I mean, I'm always going to say this. So, like, whether one thing is right or wrong, getting hit in the head is just not good for you, ever.
That's true.
If you bump your head into the refrigerator, going to,
heading a soccer ball.
Not good. It's just not good.
Yeah.
So this is what we live with. These guys know the risks. I think the more you get the weight cut down and your brain's not dehydrated, because I think, like, the brain is the last place to get the fluid when you're rehydrating. So, again, another good question is maybe 205 is a better fit, because I don't see this ever happening in the gym. Like, I'm telling you, ever. So.
But this was, all indications were, and you would know better than anyone else, he looked to be in the shape of his life. I mean, this was an outstanding training camp. It seemed to be the best he looked on the scale to me, seemed to be an outstanding cut. I got to think he has some pause to move up after a cut that goes that well, no?
Well, I agree with you 100%, because I'm telling you the weight cut went good, but that would be something we have to really talk to him. Look, and Kenny, you know this, no weight cut. If the average person watches a fighter make weight, they're going to be mortified. Would that be a correct statement, Kenny?
They would absolutely be mortified and horrified. It's really tough on your body either way. Even if it's like it's a great cut, it's still really freaking difficult, something that maybe only 1% of the human population can actually do.
Exactly, a great cut. If I tell the average person don't eat for fucking 6 hours, they might fucking kill me. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Even a good weight cut to the average guy is like, this is torture. So I'm going to say this. To me, the weight cut went great. The training camp was phenomenal. Everything was good. I'm not an expert on those last 5 days. I'm just not, man. I've seen it. I have a lot of experience witnessing it. But if you're asking me, do I know exactly what the results on the body are? I don't. So maybe 205 might be a place where he comes in just stronger, more coherent, everything, all those attributes that go with that. So I don't know. I really don't know. But
it's a good reset button too. It's a good reset button to change weight classes. So who knows?
Look at Gastelum. Look at Whitaker. These are guys that fought at 170. They're having the time of their lives at 185.
Well, and for Chris, I'm just saying, even off a loss, given his resume, he could find himself in a light heavyweight title eliminator against the number 2 guy in the world, Anthony Smith, and fans aren't going to bat an eye at that, right? You could be one win away, not that you're in any great rush to share the octagon with John Jones or Alexander Gustafsson necessarily, but it could happen pretty expeditiously for Chris if he does move up, given what the top 5 looks like right now.
Exactly. And the older those guys get, maybe the weight cut starts to affect them more.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Very fair.
This is a really crazy thing. Those weight cuts, and I'm saying when I say the weight cut went well, I'm telling you, if you're the average guy, I think I was talking to Mark Lamonter about this, because he comes to the weight cuts because he reports it. Dude, it's brutal. It's fucking brutal. I'm telling you. The weight cut was good, but if you ask his wife, it wasn't good.
Well, right. And I'm basing it on my conversation with him, which was Wednesday, and also the fact that his eyes just looked much better to me, not so black. Not that he was smiling up there. But, for guys like Rockhold and Weidman, there's nothing for Rockhold, it is absolutely brutal making 186
look, he was very, very dedicated to this fight. I'm saying we were training at 203, 202, 204. He never went above 205, I don't think, he was really good, man. But again, I'm just saying, and I don't know this. We don't really know what happens when you do that to your body. You know what I mean? Right. Some guys look good. Some guys could say they feel good.
Right.
Inside, we don't really know. And that's maybe one of I'm just offering it up. That might be one thing that, who knows? Maybe 205. Look, I would think like a 195 would be a perfect weight for him.
Right.
200 would be phenomenal. I always said that there's a lot of fighters that 160 would make a big difference, or 65, instead of 55. But, it's like that boxing, years ago when boxing was very competitive, man, a guy tried to move up from 130 to 135. That was hard to do. because the level of skill was so competitive that even that little weight made a big difference. So these guys are giving up 15 pounds, and they got to get that. I don't know. It's tough, man. I would like to see more weight classes for sure.